stories to tell forward. How do you choose the best stories for your audience? And what really resonates?
Simone?
Hi.
Hello. So nice to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you.
I just want to say I think you're a hot ticket. You are doing great things.
Oh, thank you.
And how quickly you have picked up on some important things and taken a mission on for yourself. And that's what led me to say yes to your request to support who you are as you're going into this mission that I think is so beautiful and important.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with me. As you heard from the email, I'm Simone. I'm a singer and guitarist and just a musician. And, that's how I really got into storytelling. It was like through music because I would always have to convey emotions through my music and when I sing songs, like with the dynamics, and I have to establish that emotional connection with my audience. So that's what really got me into storytelling, and that's what really, got me curious about it. And, I checked out your website, and I think what you're doing is really great. And that's really what inspired me to, send you an email and just thank you for taking the time.
How did you find me? How did you connect to my work?
Oh, I was looking for a bunch of articles on storytelling, and I saw that you co-wrote one um, for Harvard Business Review,
Yep.
and that's how I found you.
Okay, that's great. That's fun. And they also, let's see, on my website, created several videos with me
Yeah,
that they now use in their curriculum, which is fun as well. Fun
yeah.
for me.
I checked out your website and watched all those videos, and I think it's really cool.
Neat, neat. So, how can I be of support to you?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of curious with stories, being super transformative. How do you decide, when you're presenting stories to an audience, how do you decide what stories you're going to tell them or what stories are going to be super compelling and are going to resonate with them?
Mhm. So, one of the things I always think through, and I have sort of a three-piece model of, and I always start with my audience. So, who are they?
Mhm.
Why are they coming to whatever it is I'm offering? And so what do they want from me? What do they expect? And what can I also bring them that that they might not know that they want or expect that can move them even further than they think they want. So if I'm going in to talk to school kids, it's going to be different than I do a lot of work with the unhoused or within correctional facilities, as well as I do a lot of how I earn my bread and butter is in organizations and working with leaders in transformational storytelling. So it can even be the same story, but how I set it up and the kinds of messages I'm trying to deliver through it can look different with the same sort of vehicle. So it's I call it story intelligence. It's
Mhm.
first knowing me and what I have in my repertoire, what I offer. It's also knowing other and who they are, what they need, what they want, and what their own mission and agenda is. And then it's putting those two together with what do I have that can move us forward together to a new place. So it's always different, and I'm always trying to expand my repertoire to meet increasingly those needs. So that's how staying involved in lots of different storytelling communities, listening all the time to stories, but also I do a lot of my writing and journaling of what am I learning, what stories do I have when I think of a lesson or a value that I want to convey. What stories do I have from my own lived experience that actually capture that? And or when I'm working with especially in organizations with executives, they'll always say, I don't have any stories, but I start asking some questions that lead them to actually um, realize they have a wealth of stories. And it doesn't have to be always in organizational life. Sometimes it's even more powerful when they pull from their personal life to bring forward an organizational value. Um, and it's an it's a process that can work from either direction. So, for instance, uh, I was working with an organization recently, a nonprofit in the Boston area, that is trying to create their values for the organization, and so they came up with a list of values.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things I said is, so tell me about a moment when you saw that value in action. And so they had to go back and think, these values, they're theoretical constructs, but what does that look like in being, in living, in interacting, in being there? And so to pull those stories to support those values. But then the flip is, I said, so tell me actually some stories of moments when you were really proud to be part of this company and what happened. And out of those stories, we started to see what were actually the values of action, and were there some there that weren't even on their list that they, oh yeah, that's actually really important. So it's, I'm probably answering more than you want in your question, but that it's it's a fluid, organic process that happens in relationship, and the more you do that, the more, when you anticipate the next audience and have a sense of their context and why they're coming, you know primarily what to bring. One more piece of that, I sometimes will set up a repertoire. And I bet you found this as a performer. You get in there and you put out a song or a story, and you realize where the energy is.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I'll start to shift. I'm going to think, you know what? I'm not going to tell that one. I'm going to tell this one. And because you grow the energy once you're in that relationship. And if you're confident enough in your material and you have a good repertoire, you start to switch out and bring it home in a whole different way.
I think that's really great because that actually leads into my second question, which is, there's so many like different varieties of stories. There's all these simple folk tales with these simple morals, but there are also stories from personal experiences, right? So, how do you kind of decide what type of stories you want to use?
It has to, first of all, the story has to resonate for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not passionate about it, it's not, even though someone else might be and it might work for them, you've got to say, this is an important story, because then you're going to convey it in a way that will work. The second piece to that is you sort of find your realm and your passion. So I started out over 25 years ago as a storyteller, and I thought storytelling was telling folk tales. And so I learned a lot of folk tales and I told them in schools. But what I realized really resonated for me was personal stories. And so I, in my own evolution and development, I'll occasionally tell a folk tale, but primarily I tell personal stories. And that's my brand and who I am and what I do. And then that evolved for me in helping other people find their stories and learn to tell them in a way that's impactful as a coach. And then, because I'm a psychologist, what I became really interested in is, when are people telling stories that actually aren't helpful to them? And so how do I listen and help them think through how to shift their stories such that they're moving more into a healing story that I say is more sustaining for them than constraining for them. So that's become a whole other piece of work that I do that's more therapeutic: story listening and storytelling. So it's who you are and what you love and what you find work. I know a lot of, just thinking about entering this through musicians, what I love, because I love storytelling, when I go to a concert and the musician ties together either how this story evolved for them or where they were when they first heard it or learned it or what led them to write it. Those are personal stories. And they're tying their whole set together with these beautiful personal stories that, to me, then bring that song to a whole nother depth of how I'm hearing it and understanding it and its context. And when a musician, because I'm more attuned to the story, it just goes from song to song to song, I'm less engaged than if I feel like I'm getting to know who they are and why these songs resonate for them and it connects me to their passion before they even start to play.
So I came up with Charismafy, which is like a database of thousands of different stories that you can just easily access. And so far, our target audience has been like little kids, like kids in elementary schools who maybe are just watching a bunch of TV and their parents want to engage with them more and want to establish that emotional bond with their kids so they can easily access these stories instead of trying to scour the internet for just a simple story. You could just go to this app and just get some stories on demand. So far, our target audience has been moms with very young kids. But do you think this could benefit, being the keynote speaker yourself, do you think this could benefit others, like professors or speakers or people like that?
Oh, absolutely. Anybody. Uh, so what's tricky, but I think could all be overcome, is in thinking about your audience. It's a broad audience to start with, from little kids to organizational leaders or professors.
Yeah.
That's so. But I think that what you're doing can have application throughout, and perhaps as you think about Charismafy and how you want to set it up, you might actually have tabs. I mean, if you look at my website, you know that I say, so this is for organizations, this is for nonprofits, this is for, so an audience can go to the area that is most applicable to them. And I have some videos that are in both places, but I also have some that are unique and specific to that audience, so that I don't have to worry that someone's going to get into a general place and think this doesn't fit for me if they haven't taken it deeper. They can go immediately to the area that, all right, I see where I belong, and then through that might venture into some of the other places as well. But there's an immediate place where they can land and feel connected. So for you to start looking at your material, this is just one idea, and to think, all right, maybe it's even the same story and you tell it a little differently if it's to an under 12 than you do to an adult, and how you even tie in the lessons from it might look and feel differently, or it's a different story that has maybe some more complexity or a more complex lesson to it that's more for an adult than for a child, and that you just set it up that way so people can enter where they feel most appropriate, and you can be thinking of your audience as you continue to upload more there.
So far in Charismafy, we've just had just simple stories with lessons and morals. And you kind of gave me this idea. Do you think it would be beneficial if we were to interview other leaders of organizations and maybe put their personal stories on Charismafy as well? Maybe that would target towards more like organizations and leaders.
I think that's a great idea. I think that before you go there, I'd start at a different level and maybe start with uh, teachers, and to see what their stories are. To get more and to think of some prompts that you might give to people in advance to think about, to have some, not just tell a story, because what they're going to do is immediately try to go to a folk tale. If you're looking for more personal stories, to think of some themes of, for instance, if you want to look at courage as a theme, to put out a prompt of, what was a time that you stepped up and spoke when it was hard, or what was a time that you did something that scared you and we're glad that you did. And then you get people to start thinking in a more specific area and just little snippets, and then you can start to, I think it'd be interesting to have not just sort of generic personal stories, but themes. So I'd practice on an audience that might be organizations and leaders. They're a little tricky. Their time is intense, and they're more thinking, I found, how can you serve me rather than how can I serve you? But I wouldn't give up. but I might start with an audience that might be more receptive and excited to build this with you as a starting place. So to think who that, and it might be some of the parents that you find their kids are coming, and to have an ad place of, do you have a story you want to tell? Or here's a list of some prompts, and what does this bring up for you? And what you're also encouraging then, which I think is one of the goals that I know a lot of my peers and colleagues have, is to build that kind of family connection, is to have parents start to tell more of their own stories to their kids, not just folk tales, but who I am, where I came from, what's important to me, and why, how I came to feel strongly about such and such. And what those stories are revealing are really family values. And that's how we convey them to our children, is why I do what I do, why this is important to me. And to have a place where you can encourage that by putting out some prompts and getting them to think about that, and or if they want to record it and have it here that their child can even find them or other kids can, that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's such a great idea. And the next thing I wanted to ask was like stories being, really powerful and really transformative and super compelling. Do you think they're commonly used in real life? And if not, why do you think, they're not as commonly used given how useful they are?
I think they're being used all the time, whether we're
Mm-hmm.
intentional or not. That's how we engage. And when we're trying to persuade another, what we'll often share is our story, and of why it's something, how we see it. Uh, in some, like academic realms and others, people will put all the facts out, but
Yeah.
even there, they are realizing that a story is more powerful than facts. And that's what I teach in organizations, that you can put out all the facts, but if someone has a story that's um, in them that makes more sense to them than the facts, they're going to dispute your facts with their story. So if you can actually wrap those facts in a story that's more compelling than the story they have, that's how you persuade another. And that goes back to Aristotle, but we do it intuitively all the time. So we're just not aware of it. And I think increasingly, especially in organizations, they're now realizing, oh, wait a minute, this is powerful stuff. And when I started working in organizations 20 years ago, I didn't originally even use the word story or storytelling, because they thought, oh, that's kid stuff. So I did narrative-based persuasion. And then they started saying, oh, what is that? It's storytelling. Thank goodness over the last 15 years, that term has more gravitas, and people are saying, I want storytelling. That's Harvard was, I think, 8 years ago. How they found me was they were Googling storytelling leadership. Nothing came up except for me, because I was the only one that had the courage to put that on my website. So thank goodness. And now there's all kinds of people who are doing it, and it's growing exponentially. So I think it's always been done. I think it's now being valued, and that's the beginning of a wave. And you're on it, so that's exciting.
Yeah, one of the other reasons why I was really kind of I wanted to learn more about storytelling is because in school I would be doing all these presentations to my classmates because, they kind of want to get you used to public speaking. And I would be giving these presentations and I would be so nervous because I would just have a slideshow up and it would just be so boring because it would just be bullet points. And I was like, how can I make this more interesting? So I think that's where finding stories and trying to incorporate those into presentations has really kind of opened like a new window of different things that I could do in my presentations to make it different and to make it compelling and honestly to
Yeah.
just make it better.
Yeah. No, you're onto it. So I have a couple of thoughts for you. You've gotten so far just sort of on your own researching. Have you come across the National Storytelling Network?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, so you're on their website. Are you on their listserv?
No, I've just been trying to find people to interview, and I've been looking for members
Yeah.
from the organizations to interview.
But if you get on their
Hmm.
listserv, and it's free, you don't have to be a member, although
Hmm.
being a member is great. And they have what they call special interest groups,
Hmm.
and there is an educators interest group. Uh, I'm trying to think what's the acronym is. Anyway, they if you so twofold. If you become a member, then you can also you're automatically can join one special interest group, and to be in the educators one puts you in touch with all the other people who are using storytelling in education, and you will have a vast network of colleagues and professionals who are doing what you're doing, and they're working hard to go into schools to be telling the right stories. A lot of them are using folk tales to teach curriculum, advising teachers in that, and it'll just build your colleagueship hugely. To get on their listserv, which is free, you will get pushed in a daily basis. People saying, and then you can use it as well. I've been invited into a school to tell a story about friendship. What are some ideas? And then 20 storytellers give them their favorite story about friendship. And it's just this wealth for you of um, being able to access and talk and be privy to the conversations that are already happening around just exactly what you're doing. So that's one. The second, and this may be less interest of you, but it's where my passion is the Healing Story Alliance,
Hmm.
which it was a special interest group of NSN. It's still listed as such, but we've actually migrated to become our own nonprofit organization, and we also have our own listserv. But we have, like, I don't know if you've been on there to explore it. Every other Wednesday night, we have a program that um, it's called Oars in the Water, which is what are stories we need to be hearing and playing with right now in order through these turbulent times. And it started in COVID, but we've carried it on to feel connected, grounded, and moving forward. So on Wednesday, the 26th, I don't know if you come across Heather Forrest. She's a beautiful storyteller who has several CDs and books. She's written like 12 books of compilations of folk tales and fairy tales. Uh, she is going to be talking with Sarah DeBeer, who's another storyteller in Connecticut, about who are our mentors and in our lives. And so, anyway, every other Wednesday, it's a free program. You can come on. Um, I produce once a month something called Kind Stories in Concert.
Hmm.
And I don't know, again, whether you've seen this or not, ads for it, but the first Sunday of the month, we take the summer off. It'll start up again in the fall. We have three professional storytellers who tell a story about kindness. We usually have a mix between folk tales and personal tales, and then we invite two members from the community who are not professional storytellers to just because we're trying to get fresh voices. And if you
Hmm.
would like to be a teller, I would love to bring you in, who's not a professional teller but has a story about kindness to get you some visibility and to
Hmm.
talk about your work with Charismafy would be an incredible story for you to tell. So that's also free. And then we have special events programs where they're a pay as you are able, but we bring in all different kinds of workshops and concerts that have always to do with some aspect of change, which is healing, which I think you're in that world of Christmafy, of trying to bring about transformation through story. So another community that you might want to belong to. There's no membership fee for Healing Story Alliance. You can get on the again, um, sign up to be pushed announcements of what's coming, and then you choose what you want to go to.
I
So
think,
two areas.
yeah, I think that's really cool. Thank you so much. I'll definitely make sure to check all of that out. And as you were talking about, telling stories, that's another thing I wanted to ask because when I used to perform, there would be different ways that I would perform music where I would have some videos where I would, sing the songs and it would be fine. But then I would have other videos where I would, you know, bring the emotion and bring the emotional connections and the dynamics and make make the song a story and take my audience on this vicarious journey to make them forget all of their worries and just have a good time with the song. So, how do you present the stories? Because, you know, having the story is one thing, but also presenting it in a compelling way and embodying that story. Like, how do you do that in a really compelling way?
You learn from others who are doing it, and that's that. And it takes time, and you keep practicing and working and putting it out and getting feedback. So the storyteller I mentioned, Heather Forrest, she always tells stories with her guitar, and you can Google her, YouTube her, go on her website and start watching what she does. Some she tells the whole story through a song. Others she tells the story and brings the guitar in at the beginning, at the end. Some she emphasizes it with the guitar. Um, there's another teller in New Hampshire, and Odds Bodkin. I don't know if you've seen his work. He uses the guitar as an emotional part of his storytelling. So he will set up, he always has it, and he'll start telling the story, and then he'll start like background music, building it with intensity, and then if he'll have certain chords that go with certain characters. So he'll start to introduce a chord, you know this character is speaking. So there's all kinds of really creative, brilliant ways to integrate your various skills and passions. But I'd go to those who've been doing it for 30 years and see how they have done it, and to watch it and to start then develop your own style. You don't need to mimic them, learn from them, and then make your own style how you want to do it.
I think that's really cool, and I'll definitely make sure to check those people out because I think that's really like a different way of using instruments because you know you can't just, there's way many more ways to use just a guitar, for example, rather than just singing a song with it, and I think that's just super creative.
Yeah. Odds Bodkin, I don't know personally. I've just watched, been in his audience many, many times, and I own most of his CDs. He does a lot of classic myths, um, like he has a whole one on Hercules that's like powerful. But Heather, I actually was just on talking for her 2 hours before I talked to you because we co-lead the Healing Story Alliance, and we're always trying to build our archives there. And in fact, to go in there to the Healing Story Alliance, go into the archives, you can find you probably have 50 stories, if not more, that are videos of tellers, and you can see also some of Heather's work in there. But I think if you wanted to interview her, she'd be delighted, and that it would open a whole world. And I will let her know when you interview her to bring her guitar and to have her illustrate for you live the kinds of things that she has done and learned. So that I think will get you started in a whole other direction.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I think that's so cool and so creative. So I was reading an article a few days ago, and I saw that the author was saying that people remember stories 22 times better. And so, how much value do you think that Charismafy could bring to a user's life? Like, for example, a kid who's been watching television but instead is reading stories. So, how much value do you think that a kid or a child would get from using Charismafy?
Well, you're preaching to the choir. I think a lot of TV is junk stories. They're not ones that carry the kind of depth and values learning. So I have a couple of stories to exemplify that. So if you can direct kids actually not only to reading but to listening to the kinds of stories that you're telling on Charismafy, to tune into that as a media that they're drawn to, but is giving them something of deeper value, that's huge. two stories that come to mind. One's a positive and one's a heartbreaking. The positive is a story that goes back to Peace Corps about 20 plus years ago, where a Peace Corps volunteer was in a village that they brought in electrical lines, and the Peace Corps volunteer saw this as a real positive, wondering how this would also just change the culture of the village and the community. And then one day saw that in the place where in the evening people gathered for stories with storytellers and shamans, they now had plugged in a TV. And everyone was gathered and like glued, not just in the evenings, but in the daytime to the TV, because it was such an anomaly. And then over time, fewer and fewer people came, and at some point it was disconnected. And when the volunteer asked what happened to the TV, people said it wasn't telling us our stories. We need to hear our stories. It had nothing to do with us, we realized. So it stopped being meaningful. That's wonderful. However, as you know, it's addictive, and it doesn't always go that way. And there's been a lot of research that's actually come out of indigenous communities where elders were valued in the home and were actually the story bearers and sharing them down, that when TVs entered the house and the youth stopped listening to the elders and their stories, that they've done some research into the increase in depression, the increase in violence, the increase in addiction in households where that shift has happened. And it's heartbreaking. Also depression amongst the elders, who no longer are listened to or valued, and feel like they don't matter anymore. So there's lots of research you can tap into, that if you want to pull some of these stories to have on like a page about why. So you see on my website, I have a whole page on why tell a story. You could find some of that research yourself, and to promote why Charismafy might be important.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I'll make sure to definitely check that out. As someone who's presented a lot of stories, I'm guessing that there was a time before you discovered stories and the power of them. So, how much value have stories brought to you? Like when you started presenting them and when you started realizing the value of them, how much value did those stories bring to your life?
So one of the things I believe is that, again, we're always telling stories. It's always there. What happened for me 25 years ago is that and as a psychologist, you've probably heard me tell this story, that part of my work was listening to stories all the time, is that I became really intentional in it, and listening in a whole different kind of way. And that has become, for me, intentional not only in the listening, but in the learning from the stories. And again, I think it happens intuitively. That the wonderful, powerful part about storytelling is that it gives us access to this huge world of lived experience and wisdom that we don't have to live to get the wisdom. Through a simple story, we can learn something that can help guide us going forward without having to have learned it the hard way, or to have made that mistake, or to have had to have the experience to get it. So when we're intentional about listening deeply and or seeking out the stories to get that, it exponentially gives us a wealth of wisdom that will impact how we respond to what happens next in our life, because we have so many more resources and tools and guides to help us. So I don't think I have ever in my life a time like pre-story and post-story. It's more awareness that shifted. The stories have always been there. It's just the awareness and the intentionality of seeking them out and learning from them that has been exponentially growing for me over time.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because in my experience, I would always talk to my friends and I would be telling them things about my life, and I wouldn't realize that I was telling stories. And in presentations where we had to present a slideshow on a certain topic, I would really be struggling. Or when we were doing seminars, I would also kind of struggle because I would have a point to make, but I wouldn't really know how to argue that in a compelling way because, of course, in the United States, it's like a whole melting pot with so many different cultures. So, how would you position stories in a way to like argue your point?
So what you're going back to sort of storytelling as a persuasive skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, so I always come back to um, my three circles, and uh, so what is it that I'm trying to persuade? What's my most important message? And why do I want to persuade this listener? So who is my audience? Um, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to feel? What do I want them to do differently? And the next part under that is, where are they resistant to that?
Mm-hmm.
And so we begin by listening first, as opposed to just keep pushing and pushing. Why isn't the pushing working? Where are they resistant? And what is their story that supports that resistance? And I want to hear that first. So tell me about you and how you see this, how you came to see this, how this is important to you. That's the first part of persuasion, is to be listening. So it goes back to that old wisdom of seek first to understand before being understood. Listen to their story first. And once you do, it's incredibly powerful. Once you know their story, let it touch you, let it move you, see where any parts overlap with yours at all. And that's where you begin, is in the overlap. And then to begin to share more of, let them feel heard first. This is what I hear in your story. This is why I hear this is important to you. This is where you are. This is where actually we're the same. And to share that part of your story first. Then you can get to, this is where we're different and why and where I see it. And then you put it back and listen to them again. So it's a story dialogue, but you seek first to listen. That's 101 in emotional intelligence and story intelligence, as I call it. It's not to persuade through my story first, it's to listen to your story first.
I think that would really help, and I think that is really going to help. I think this, like, learning with stories is not just beneficial with Charismafy, but I feel like it's also really beneficial in school and just everywhere. So, another part you said of your job is to work with leaders of organizations. And so far, I've been starting Charismafy. Um, and I want to aspire to be a really good leader. So, how would you, um, just asking for some advice, how do you think how do you think it's the best way to use stories to inspire people or to get people to see your visions?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this we've already obviously touched on.
Mm-hmm.
The first is to know your own story first. So what led you to be doing, and you can think about it even for you, Charismafy, to be doing this work at this time, and why are you passionate about it? Why do you care? So you get your story of your own evolution to now, and look underneath it, that the values that fueled that motivated this, and it will give you increasingly insight to what's important to you and why, and to develop that story. Then when I'm working with leaders, so I ask them first, who are you? What's the story that led you to do this work? What do you care about? Then if there's a particular, it could be as small as an action that you're trying to inspire people to, or a larger mission, or even a larger vision that the mission is within, to think, what is it that is your most important message in that? Why does it resonate both for you individually, and how does your story of your own sort of personal vision mission overlap with the organizational one? And that's the beginning of bringing yourself individually and your passion to that larger, and that's the story that you tell. It often in leadership is helping then others to see where they and their motivation overlap with this. uh, and that's helping people shift from, I'm just thinking about, um, you have a job, and often a job is you're there to make money. That's your mission. I'm here to make money. The next is when one gets to more of a profession, then there's a larger sort of interest that is personal, and I'm drawn to this profession because. The step beyond that is, what's my calling? Who am I within this profession, and what's uniquely mine? And when you can engage your story to touch people in their calling, then you're engaging them in their story of mission, vision, and how it overlaps with yours, and you're inspiring people to move forward. And if you think about this story, I know you've heard it of. Somebody goes and there's a group of workers, and he says, at first, what are you doing? And he says, I'm I'm building bricks. Oh, okay. And the next person, what are you doing? And they say, so I'm building bricks to make this incredible building, this cathedral. And the third is, what are you doing? I'm building bricks to make this cathedral because it is a place to bring people together to celebrate their spirit. So you've gone from job to profession to calling, and that's the level of inspiration. And so, how do you touch that?
Yeah, I think the reason I wanted to ask that is because I've been wanting to start a club at school. And I think, starting a club is great, but the hardest thing is trying to find members for the club, or else it's not a club. So
Yeah.
that was the main thing I wanted to that was the main thing I was wondering, because okay, like, you want to start a club, but how are you going to get people to join it? That's the biggest thing, and that's why nobody really starts it. So that was really why I wanted to ask that, because teenagers, I know how my friends are, and I want to create a good club, and create a club around storytelling and around sharing your stories and learning from other people's stories. But the real thing is how to get people to join that. So that's why I wanted to ask on how would you inspire people? How do you persuade them to join you on this mission?
So I realized in some ways I wasn't following my own path. To ask you more, what is your vision for it? And the most important part of, in this club, is it to build storytelling skills? Is it to come together to be of support to each other in the stories? Is it to, so to think ultimately, what do you hope happens in it, and the potential for what it could be for others? And how do you speak at that level in a way that, thinking about your friends and what it is that they might be looking for, seeking? What makes me think of, they think, I don't care about being a storyteller, but oh, I might care about being in a group where we are coming together to share stories around certain themes as a means of supporting each other in what's most important to us now. I'm just talking in general. So, for you to think through first what you want to have happen in this, and what you see as its potential, um, and then the sell is, perhaps for you to take some risks in uh, how you put yourself out there,
Mm-hmm.
with already what you're doing, and how to get people to join you in that. You really only need two to get started.
Yeah, I think it's like a really powerful thing that if you can do it, like inspiring people and getting them to join your cause, I feel like that's a really powerful skill. And that's something that I really want to master, just growing up and developing Charismafy. And coming back, having a storytelling database, so far we've been targeting parents of younger kids. So, do you think there's like a specific quantifiable value that Charismafy could bring? Or do you like how, if you had one child who was just watching TV, But then you had another child who was, instead of constantly watching shows, they were reading stories instead. So how much more value that Charismafy could bring to just a family like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is again, we've talked about this a little bit. I think it's an incredible value. Uh, what's going to be the challenge to you is to build enough of a repertoire that they don't burn through it so quickly. You know, TV's infinite. In my day growing up, there was 3 channels. Now there's thousands, and for kids, the programming is huge. So, how do you first build it so that there's some depth and breadth to it? But in addition, how do you perhaps uh, help parents understand when and how to bring it in, and perhaps not just to plunk a kid in front of it, but how one engages with it together and doesn't let it stop at the one-way viewing in a passive way. But this is where I think storytelling is really powerful, is that once it's received, to engage together, to talk about what this brings up for you. Other stories beget stories. What stories can you think of in your own life where this has happened? To engage kids in that kind of conversation where it actually is integrated and comes alive in them, as opposed to just being a cognitive, passive, and now I'm going to go to the next one and the next one, where then it just becomes sort of like gorging on dessert, which is what I think TV is, as opposed to something that can be integrated and archived internally and connected to internal stories so they can be used again. So to educate people about how to view it, how to maximize the benefit of it in a family. Maybe you do a Charismafy a night before bedtime, and then talk about it, and have it even as a prompt for parents to say more, share more.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. And honestly, when I came up with Charismafy, it just started out as this small, oh, I could do this, but I realized that there's so much other different aspects of it that I hadn't really thought about. And I think this really helped me. This kind of helped bring to light all those other subjects need to be that I need to be aware of. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me. I just really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I'll definitely let you know about the progress. I'll also look into other storytellers and maybe working on myself and working on being a leader and presenting more stories.
So, a couple of thoughts and questions back. Do you need me to send you any links to the Healing Story Alliance or NSN, or are you all set? I'm happy to send you the links if you'd like. That's my first question. The second is, would you like me to make an introduction to Heather for you?
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I'm kind of new to this realm of storytelling, and I'm also kind of excited because it came from music. So, and that's been something I've been doing since I was really young, since I was maybe 7 or 8. So, I'm just kind of excited to explore this. I'm not the most experienced yet, but I know a little bit about how to be compelling and how to bring an audience into your stories. So, yeah, I would love to learn from more storytellers.
So what I suggest is actually you go and look up Heather Forrest and watch and see some things of hers. And if you would like an introduction to her, just reach out and let me know. If you think it might be helpful, just to so don't see the relationships as a one and done.
Okay.
We're connected now.
Yeah.
And as you continue to learn and or have questions, just say, hey, can we talk a little bit? And I'll come back. And for Heather, just to say, so I'm new at this, and I play the guitar, and I'm doing storytelling. Share with me your own journey. How do you think about that instrument and storytelling community, just put together some questions that, and then don't feel like you have to have it all figured out before you talk to her. It's starting a relationship that then you can grow over time. We can become your mentors in that. And the third is, can I convince you to take the risk of coming to a Kind Stories in concert as a teller? Would you like that opportunity?
I think that would be really cool to do. So far, I've been doing like music presentations, so I would be performing and singing a song. So I've been recording videos of me presenting stories and posting them online. And so it's just kind of stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit because, singing versus talking. I mean, I know how to present in front of an audience, but it's like talking is like kind of, oh, like it makes me a little bit nervous. So, but I think it would really be helpful, and I think
so. You're a natural, and I want to push you out of your comfort zone to try taking this next step. And so again, think about it. But what I'm going to do is send you a link to another young woman who I pushed similarly, who came to me as a mentor, and I said, "Why don't you try this?" And she did. I'm going to send you the link to the recording of her what she offered in that concert, so that you can see what another has done. And she told a personal story, and it's beautiful. And so what I offer with it, as I did with her, is we did like 2 or 3 sessions of coaching, where she told me her idea. I reflected back. We played with it a little bit. She went and developed it. She came and she performed it for me. I gave her some coaching, some feedback. She went back and worked on it, came back, performed it for me again, and she was ready to go. So it's an opportunity for you to develop a personal story that I think you have already, and I can think of I could give you some prompts to get you thinking about it. But even your work with Charismafy and how you came to it, how you're developing it, where you are with it, is, I think, touches on your heart and what you're trying to give back to the world, which is kindness. So that itself could be a story that you could develop that I think would be helpful to you beyond just this concert, but beginning to develop your own, in some ways, here I am and why I'm here. That is the beginning of your leadership in bringing others to your work. So I'll send you that link. And if I can find some links to Heather that I think might be a good place for you to start, I will. Is there anything else that would be helpful for you right now?
No, that was it. I had like a list of questions prepared, so I went ahead and, asked all of them. And honestly, I think that helped like way more. And it just gave me like a whole new perspective and brought so many more, like, made me consider so many more things than I was thinking of originally. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I will come back in a little bit with just an email saying, are you ready? Are you ready to tell a story on a more public format and be part of the archives that we're creating of new and young, all ages actually, storytellers sharing their stories. So that's another way for you to begin to build your repertoire. So anyway, you did a beautiful job. Your questions were great. It was fun for me to talk to you, and I want to welcome you in to the field as a colleague and not lose touch with you, because you are the future for us and for storytelling. And right now, there's a lot of us who are gray-haired, and I think that the potential for story to continue to grow rests on the shoulders of people like you. So thank you for your excitement, your passion, and what you're already doing. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Where do you live, by the way, Simone? Where's home for you?
Oh, I live in Atlanta, Georgia.
Ah, okay. That's great. So I do actually a lot of work at Georgia Tech.
Oh, okay.
And I come to Atlanta usually twice a year to work. They're very devoted towards supporting diversity initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a program called Leading Women at Tech, and that they're trying to get more women involved in leadership positions. And so I teach some workshops for them, for their faculty and admin. They also have a program called Transformative Storytelling for their students, where they're looking at how do we share our stories of diversity, of what we each bring and how it's important to our community, and they try to archive those. So it's not unlike Charismafy. It's within their own university setting, collecting the stories of who we are and our value to the community. So there's good stuff that's happening all around you. There's also some really wonderful storytellers in Atlanta that at some point you might want to go check out.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I will look forward to having further conversations down the road.
Yeah.
So stay cool. I know it's hot down there.
Yeah.
And we'll talk again.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.